Have you ever wondered if the strongest looking people are sometimes carrying the heaviest burdens? If you're silently struggling today, this story is for you. And what Elon Musk realized during some of the hardest public moments of his life may change the way you see your own. There is a strange belief that success erases pain. We see someone standing on a stage leading companies, making impossible ideas seem real, and we assume they must have everything figured out. But life rarely works that way. Behind every visible achievement is an invisible battle that almost nobody sees. When people look at Elon Musk, they often see rockets, electric cars, groundbreaking technology, and headlines that dominate the news. They see confidence. They see ambition. They see someone willing to risk everything for a dream that most people would never even dare to imagine. But there is another side to every public story. The truth was far more complicated. What happens when the person everyone believes is unstoppable begins facing pressure from every direction? What happens when the expectations become heavier than anyone could possibly carry? And perhaps the biggest question of all, how do you keep moving forward when your mind is telling you to stop? These questions are not just about one famous entrepreneur. They're about every person who has ever sat alone in a room pretending everything was fine. Maybe that's you. Maybe nobody around you knows how exhausted you've become. Maybe you've learned how to laugh in conversations while carrying worries you never mention. Maybe you've convinced yourself that asking for help would somehow make you weak. But what happened next surprised almost everyone. Throughout his career, Elon Musk has spoken publicly about periods of overwhelming pressure, sleepless nights, enormous responsibility, and moments when failure seemed frighteningly close. Building companies that many experts believed would never survive meant living with constant uncertainty. Every decision carried consequences. Every setback became front-page news. Imagine waking up each morning knowing millions of people are waiting to judge whether you succeed or fail before the day even begins. Most people never experience that level of public scrutiny. Yet, even without cameras following us, we create our own invisible audience. We worry about disappointing our families. We fear letting down our friends. We compare ourselves with people whose lives seem perfect online. And slowly, quietly, without realizing it, the pressure begins to grow. Psychologists often describe this as carrying an invisible emotional backpack. At first, it feels light. A stressful day here, a disappointment there, one difficult conversation, one unexpected setback. You tell yourself you'll deal with it tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes next week becomes next month. Then one morning you wake up wondering why everything suddenly feels so heavy. But was it sudden or had the weight been growing all along? That question changes everything, because emotional struggles rarely arrive like a storm. More often, they arrive like tiny drops of water filling a glass. One drop doesn't seem important, neither does the second or the hunt until finally the glass overflows. What Elon realized during several difficult chapters of his professional journey was something many people never learn until much later in life. Strength isn't pretending, nothing hurts. Strength is continuing to move with purpose even when life feels uncertain. Notice the difference. Not ignoring fear, not eliminating fear, moving despite fear. That's a lesson repeated across countless stories of resilience. Yet one question remained unanswered. Where does that kind of resilience actually come from? Most people assume resilience is something you're born with, but research tells a different story. Resilience grows through experience. It develops each time someone faces disappointment without allowing disappointment to define them. It grows every time a person chooses hope over surrender. It grows every time someone says, "Today was difficult, but tomorrow deserves another chance." That sounds simple. Living it is something entirely different. Think about your own life for a moment. How many battles have you fought that nobody knows about? How many nights have you stayed awake replaying conversations in your head? How many times have you questioned whether you were good enough? If your answer is more than once, you're not alone. And perhaps you've been measuring yourself with the wrong standard all along. The world celebrates visible victories, promotions, awards, recognition, money, followers. But life is also shaped by invisible victories. Choosing not to give up. Getting out of bed on a difficult morning. Making one more phone call. Applying for one more opportunity after repeated rejection, lost smiling at someone else while quietly rebuilding yourself. Those victories rarely make headlines, yet they may be the ones that matter most. But what happened next shocked everyone. As Elon continued pursuing increasingly ambitious goals, critics became louder. Every obstacle became another reason for people to predict failure. Every delay became another opportunity for doubt to spread. It's easy to believe criticism only hurts people who lack confidence. That's another myth. Confidence doesn't eliminate emotional pain. It simply changes how you respond to it. The strongest people still hear criticism. They still experience disappointment. They still wonder if they're making the right decisions. The difference is what happens after those thoughts appear. Do they stop moving or do they keep walking? That choice often defines the next chapter. And maybe that's where your story is today. Not at the ending, not at the beginning, but somewhere in the middle. The middle is uncomfortable because nothing feels certain. You don't know whether today's struggle will eventually become tomorrow's breakthrough. You don't know whether the opportunity you're waiting for is 1 week away or 1 year away. You don't know whether the pain you're carrying today is preparing you for something you can't yet imagine. The hardest part about living through difficult seasons is that they never announce how close the turning point really is. Sometimes people quit just before everything changes. Not because they weren't capable, because they couldn't see what was waiting beyond the next step. What Elon realized at that moment changed everything. Progress is often invisible before it becomes obvious. Seeds grow underground long before anyone sees a tree. The same is true for people. Growth happens in silence. Healing happens in silence. Character is built in silence. The world only notices after the results appear. So if you're quietly struggling today, maybe you're not falling behind. Maybe you're growing in ways that cannot yet be measured. But one mystery still remains. How do you keep believing in tomorrow when today already feels overwhelming? The answer begins with the realization that few people discover until life forces them to. And that realization changes everything. The question we left hanging was impossible to ignore. How do you keep believing in tomorrow when today already feels overwhelming? The answer doesn't arrive all at once. It reveals itself slowly, often in the moments when you feel like you've reached your limit. If you've ever believed that one bad season defines your future, you're not alone. Most people think life moves in straight lines. Work hard, succeed, make good decisions, get good results. But reality is rarely that simple. The truth was far more complicated. Throughout Elon Musk's public career, there were moments when setbacks seemed to arrive one after another. Product delays, financial uncertainty, public criticism, impossible deadlines, and constant pressure created an environment where every decision carried enormous weight. From the outside, people saw headlines. From the inside, it was a series of difficult choices that demanded persistence, even when the outcome was uncertain. But what happened next surprised almost everyone. Instead of waiting for certainty, he continued making decisions without knowing exactly how they would turn out. That doesn't mean every decision was perfect. It means progress often required moving forward without guarantees. Think about your own life. How many opportunities have you postponed because you wanted complete confidence first? How many conversations have you avoided because you feared rejection? How many dreams have remained only dreams because the timing never felt perfect? Most of us are waiting for a feeling that never comes. We tell ourselves, I'll start when I'm ready. But what if readiness isn't something you find? What if it's something you create? That question changes everything. Psychologists often describe fear as a protective system. Its job is to keep us safe. But sometimes the same system that protects us also keeps us trapped. It convinces us that staying where we are is safer than risking change, even when staying still is quietly hurting us. Imagine standing at the edge of a bridge covered in fog. You can't see the other side. Does that mean the bridge ends halfway? Of course not. You simply can't see far enough. Life works the same way. Your next chapter may already exist. You just haven't walked far enough to see it. Yet, one question remained unanswered. Why do some people continue walking while others stop? The answer has less to do with talent than most people believe. It has everything to do with meaning. When your reason is powerful enough, your excuses become quieter. When your purpose becomes clear, fear doesn't disappear, but it loses control. This is where many people misunderstand resilience. They imagine resilient people wake up every morning full of confidence. In reality, resilience often looks much quieter. It looks like getting up after a sleepless night. It looks like showing up even when your motivation is gone. It looks like taking one small step when the finish line is nowhere in sight. Those moments rarely receive applause, but they shape who you become. What Elon realized at that moment changed everything. Big achievements are usually built on ordinary decisions repeated consistently. One difficult phone call, one more meeting, one more attempt, one more day of refusing to quit. Success rarely announces itself while it's happening. It disguises itself as persistence. And that's why so many people give up too soon. They mistake slow progress for no progress. Have you ever planted a seed for days? Nothing seems to happen. The soil looks exactly the same. If you judged only by what you could see, you'd assume nothing was growing. But beneath the surface, everything is changing. Roots are forming, strength is developing, life is preparing itself before anyone notices. People are no different. Sometimes your greatest growth is completely invisible. Maybe that's why your current struggle feels so confusing. You're looking for visible proof that things are improving. But some transformations happen long before the results appear. The truth is far more complicated. Emotional exhaustion doesn't always come from doing too much. Sometimes it comes from carrying too much unspoken disappointment, unfinished grief, constant comparison, the pressure to appear okay, the fear that if people knew how difficult things really felt, they would see you differently. So you stay quiet, you keep smiling, you keep saying, I'm fine. Until one day you barely recognize yourself. But what happened next shocked everyone. The moment many people finally admit they're struggling is often the same moment healing begins. Not because the problems instantly disappear, because pretending finally ends. There is incredible strength in honesty. Not public honesty for attention, private honesty with yourself. Looking in the mirror and saying, this season is difficult, this hurts, I'm tired, but I'm still here. Those four words carry extraordinary power. I'm still here. Think about everything you've survived already. The disappointments you thought would break you. The failures you believed you would never recover from. The moments you cried without anyone knowing. And yet here you are, still breathing, still hoping, still searching for something better. Have you given yourself enough credit for that? Or have you been so focused on where you haven't arrived that you've forgotten how far you've already come? That question deserves an honest answer because comparison has a weight of stealing gratitude. Social media shows fetish chapters, rarely the difficult drafts. You compare your behind the scenes with someone else's highlight reel and wonder why your life feels incomplete. But everyone is carrying something invisible. Some people hide it behind success, others hide it behind humor, some hide it behind constant busyness. Pain doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism. Sometimes it looks like overwork. Sometimes it looks like never slowing down because silence would force you to face thoughts you've been avoiding. Yet one mystery remained. If struggle is part of every meaningful journey, why do we fear it so much? Perhaps because we've been taught that struggle means we're failing. What if it means we're growing instead? Every meaningful transformation demands discomfort. Athletes grow stronger by challenging muscles. Students grow wiser by solving difficult problems. Relationships grow deeper through honest conversations. Character grows through adversity. Without resistance, there is no strength. Without uncertainty, there is no courage. Without difficult seasons, we rarely discover what we're truly capable of. What Elon realized at that moment changed everything. The goal was never to avoid hardship. The goal was to become the kind of person who could keep moving through it. And maybe that's exactly where your story is leading. Not toward a life without challenges, but toward a version of yourself that no challenge can permanently defeat. Still, one final question remained unanswered. What happens when the struggle you've been carrying begins to transform you instead of controlling you? The answer isn't what most people expect, and it may become the most important lesson of all. We've come a long way together. You began this journey with a simple but powerful question. How do you keep going when you're quietly struggling? Along the way, we discover that resilience isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's about choosing one more step even when the road ahead is hidden. But now, the story reaches its most important turning point, because surviving isn't the same as transforming, and what happened next shocked everyone. There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize that the battle isn't only happening around them, it's happening inside them. One voice whispers, "You've come too far to quit." The other quietly asks, "What if you'll never be enough?" Which voice wins? The answer isn't determined by talent, it's determined by the voice you choose to feed every single day. Throughout Elon Musk's public journey, one pattern has remained remarkably consistent. Even during periods of intense criticism, uncertainty, and setback, he continued focusing on solving problems, instead of becoming consumed by the opinions surrounding him. That doesn't mean the criticism disappeared. It means he repeatedly redirected his attention toward what he could actually influence. That distinction matters more than most people realize. Because anxiety often grows from trying to control things we never could. We want everyone to understand us. We want every plan to succeed. We want every relationship to last. We want every risk to pay off. But life doesn't offer those guarantees. The truth was far more complicated. The moment you accept that some things will always remain outside your control, something unexpected begins to happen. Your energy starts returning. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What can I do next?" That small shift changes everything. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with rocks. Each rock represents something you cannot control, someone else's opinion. Yesterday's mistakes, the fear of tomorrow, old regrets, unanswered questions. Every day you carry them, the journey becomes harder. Now imagine setting down just one rock. You immediately feel lighter. Not because life became easier, because you stopped carrying what never belonged to you. How many emotional rocks are you still carrying? That question deserves your attention. But what happened next surprised almost everyone. Many people spend years searching for confidence. They think confidence comes before action. In reality, confidence usually follows action. Think back to when you first learned something difficult. Driving, speaking in front of people, starting a new job. At first, everything felt uncomfortable. You doubted yourself. You made mistakes. You questioned whether you belonged. Then something changed. Not overnight. Little by little, each attempt made the next one slightly easier. Confidence wasn't waiting at the beginning. It was quietly being built along the way. The same is true for healing. Most people expect healing to feel dramatic. One breakthrough, one conversation, one perfect day where everything suddenly makes sense. Real healing is usually much quieter. It looks like laughing again after months of sadness. It looks like sleeping a little better than last week. It looks like realizing you smiled without forcing it. Small moments almost invisible until one day you look back and realize you're no longer the person who began the journey. What Elon realized at that moment changed everything. Growth often disguises itself as ordinary days. Not every meaningful transformation comes with applause. Sometimes your greatest breakthrough happens during an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when you decide, I'm not giving up today. No one celebrates that decision. No headlines appear. No audience stands and applauds. Yet it may become one of the most important choices of your life. Yet one question remained unanswered. Why do painful experiences sometimes create stronger people? Psychologists have studied this for years. They found that while adversity can certainly be damaging, it can also become a powerful source of growth when people find meaning in what they've endured. This doesn't mean suffering is good. It means suffering doesn't have to be the end of the story. Meaning changes everything. A setback can become a lesson. A failure can become preparation. A disappointment can become direction. Only when you decide it will, that choice belongs to you. Perhaps you've been waiting for someone else to rescue you. Someone to finally say exactly the right words. Someone to make the pain disappear. But here's the difficult truth. No one can walk your journey for you. They can encourage you, support you, love you, believe in you. But eventually, you must choose the next step yourself. And that realization is both frightening and incredibly freeing. Because if your future isn't controlled by someone else, then neither are your possibilities. The truth was far more complex. Many of the limits we believe in are stories we've repeated so many times that they've begun to sound like facts. I'm too old, I'm too late, I'm not smart enough. I always fail, I'm not the kind of person who succeeds. But are those facts or are they simply familiar thoughts? There's an enormous difference. Thoughts are not always reality. They're often reflections of fear. And fear has a habit of speaking with absolute certainty. It says you'll never recover, you'll embarrass yourself, everyone is judging you. But fear rarely tells the whole story. It never tells you about the opportunities waiting on the other side of courage. It never tells you about the people you'll meet, the strength you'll discover, the wisdom you'll gain, or the life you haven't imagined yet. But what happened next shocked everyone. The people who eventually create meaningful lives aren't always the smartest. They're rarely the luckiest. More often, they're simply the ones who refuse to let one difficult chapter become the title of the entire book. Think about that. A chapter is not the whole story. One failure is not your identity. One rejection is not your future. One painful season is not your final destination. You are still writing. You are still becoming. You are still growing. And maybe that's why you're here today. Not by accident, but because some part of you still believes there's another chapter waiting to be written. Hold on to that feeling. Protect it. Because hope isn't weakness. Hope is the quiet decision to believe that tomorrow can be different from today, even when you can't yet see how what Elon realized at that moment changed everything. The greatest breakthroughs don't always begin with changing your circumstances. They often begin with changing the story you tell yourself about those circumstances. Instead of saying, I'm broken, you begin saying, I'm rebuilding. Instead of saying, I failed, you say, I'm learning. Instead of saying it's over, you ask, what if this is actually the beginning? That single question has changed countless lives. But one final mystery still remained. If the struggle was preparing you rather than defeating you, what kind of person would you become on the other side? The answer to that question is where this journey reaches its most powerful conclusion, and what Elon-inspired mindset reveals in that final chapter may become the lesson you carry with you long after this video ends. We've reached the final chapter. At the beginning of this journey, we asked a question that millions of people quietly carry in their hearts. How do you keep moving forward when no one knows you're struggling? Along the way, we discovered that resilience isn't about never falling. It's about refusing to let a difficult season become your permanent identity. We explored how pressure can either break you or build you, how fear often disguises itself as certainty, and how the strongest transformations usually happen where no one is watching. But one final question remained unanswered. What happens after the struggle? Not after everything becomes perfect, after you become different, because that's the part most people never talk about. The truth was far more complicated. People often believe success changes your life. In reality, growth changes your life first. Success is simply one possible result of that growth. Imagine climbing a mountain before sunrise. For hours, you're walking in darkness. Your legs ache. The path is steep. There are moments when you wonder if you're even heading in the right direction. Then, almost without warning, the first light appears. The mountain didn't suddenly become easier. You simply gained a new perspective. Life works the same way. Sometimes the breakthrough isn't a new opportunity. Sometimes it's seeing your current life through new eyes. But what happened next surprised almost everyone. Many of the world's most accomplished people eventually realized that achievement alone cannot create peace. Reaching one goal simply reveals another horizon. If your sense of worth depends only on your next accomplishment, you'll spend your life chasing a finish line that keeps moving. That's why mindset matters so much. Throughout Elon Musk's public career, one lesson appears again and again. Focus on solving meaningful problems. Keep learning, adapt when reality changes, and don't let temporary setbacks define your long-term direction. Public interviews and his actions consistently reflect a willingness to revise plans when new information appears, rather than treating every obstacle as the end of the journey. That lesson reaches far beyond business. It applies to every life, every relationship, every dream, every difficult season. What Elon realized at that moment changed everything. The future isn't created by predicting every obstacle. It's created by responding to each obstacle with curiosity instead of defeat. Think about that. What if the challenge you're facing today isn't asking you to become stronger overnight? What if it's simply asking you to take one more honest step, one more conversation, one more application, one more apology, one more attempt, one more sunrise? Sometimes that's enough. Yet, one question remained. How do you know when you're finally healing? Perhaps the answer isn't found in dramatic moments. Perhaps healing begins when you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What is this experience teaching me?" That question changes everything because every experience leaves something behind. Pain can leave bitterness or it can leave wisdom. Failure can leave regret or it can leave resilience. Disappointment can leave fear or it can leave clarity about what truly matters. The choice isn't always easy, but it is always powerful. The truth was far more complicated. There will still be difficult mornings. There will still be unexpected setbacks. There will still be moments when doubt quietly returns and whispers that nothing has changed. When that happens, remember this. Progress is rarely a straight line. Some days you'll feel unstoppable. Other days you'll feel like you've taken 3 steps backward. Neither day defines you. Consistency does. Showing up again does. Refusing to surrender does. Have you noticed something remarkable? The person who started watching the story isn't exactly the same person finishing it. Not because your circumstances necessarily changed during these minutes. Because your perspective might have. And perspective has extraordinary power. Two people can stand in the same storm. One sees only destruction. The other sees the rain nourishing tomorrow's growth. The storm is identical. The meaning is different. But what happened next shocked everyone. At some point, every person reaches a quiet crossroads. One road is familiar. It says stay exactly where you are. It feels safer. Don't risk disappointment. The other road is uncertain. It says take the next step. You don't need all the answers. You only need enough courage for today. Which road are you choosing? Only you can answer that. No famous entrepreneur, no motivational speaker, no friend, no book, no video, only you. And perhaps that's the most empowering truth of all. Your future is not written by your fear, it's written by the decisions you make while fear is present. That's courage, not the absence of fear, the decision to move anyway. What Elon realized at that moment changed everything. Every extraordinary achievement begins as an ordinary decision. A decision to try, a decision to learn, a decision to continue. Long before anyone applauds the results, someone quietly chooses not to quit. Maybe today that someone is you. So if you're quietly struggling, if you've been carrying worries that nobody else can see, if you've wondered whether anyone would understand, know this. Your current chapter is exactly that, a chapter, not the entire story. You are not defined by one failure, one heartbreak, one setback, one season of uncertainty. You're defined by what you choose to do next. Years from now, you may look back on this difficult season and realize it wasn't the chapter that ended your story. It was the chapter that introduced the strongest version of yourself. And maybe that's why you found this message today. Not because everything is falling apart, but because something inside you is still refusing to give up. Protect that part of yourself. Feed it with hope. Strengthen it with action. Guide it with purpose. Because the future belongs to people who continue walking even before they can see the destination. So before you leave, I want to ask you one final question. What is the one dream you've almost given up on, simply because it has taken longer than you expected? Don't let time convince you that the dream no longer matters. Sometimes the greatest transformations take the longest to reveal themselves.